All right. So recording has started. All right, thank you again for joining us for the Equal Pay Educational Briefing Panel. Many of you on the call today are California Equal Pay signatories, and we thank you for committing to equal pay and equity in your workplace. If you are with us today and you haven't signed the pledge, I invite you to sign the pledge. We will be putting the link in the chat. Again, a few reminders, this session is being recorded and will be available, as well as please, if you are not a panelist or if you're not asking a question, please remember to mute yourself. We will also take questions towards the end, or you can place a question in the chat. Some of you post questions in your registration form, so if we're not able to get to those today, we will be contacting you individually. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of our panelists. They have a lot of accolades. The bios are on our website. They're full bios, but I want to just do a brief introduction before we jump in. So Lena Mackey is the Director of Compensation at CSAA Insurance Group, a AAA insurer. She is accountable for the company-wide total compensation philosophy and strategy, including executive compensation and the rewards and recognition program. Lena is passionate about pay equity and transparency, as well as aligning pay to performance. Thank you for being here. Don McKinley is the Senior Director of Total Rewards and a member of UC Irvine's HR Partnership for Strategy and Innovation. Don provides vision, leadership, planning, and guidance for UCI's compensation, benefits, and retirements program, and manages a variety of HR initiatives such as Achieve, Performance, and Fair Pay. Fair Play is also good, but fair pay. Summer Brannigan is a certified global remuneration professional. Did I say that right, Summer? That's a mouthful, okay. And a seasoned expert in compensation and pay equity with over a decade of experience in total rewards. Summer earned her undergraduate degree in business with an emphasis in human resources management from California State University in Long Beach and a Master of Business Administration from the University of California in Irvine. After earning her MBA, Summer was recruited by UCI as a fair pay specialist to implement their first fair pay program, taking the lead in the UC system in driving efforts to close the gender pay gap. So thank you for being here. It's wonderful to have you. And so we're going to jump right in. But first, I'd like to level set and establish kind of a baseline understanding for everyone on the call today, so we're all on the same page. So is it fair to say a pay equity analysis centers around the belief that employees should be compensated similarly if they're doing work of equal value? Essentially, work requiring substantially similar skills, responsibilities, and job complexity, which is performed under similar working conditions, and that analyses are conducted to determine whether pay disparities exist in an organization, and for that organization to note any justified or unjustified differences, with the idea of proposing and implementing, that's the important part, implementing changes to create a fairer pay structure across the organization. Is that an accurate kind of description to kind of start us off here?
Absolutely. I think that's completely fair to say that.
Absolutely, definitely. I think we'll talk a little bit about some things that may impact some of those, but at the base, absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's get started. Thank you. So, Lena, CSAA is a national company with over 3,900 employees across all but 7 states, with 700 of those employees residing in California. When did CSAA begin conducting pay gap analysis, and what was the reasoning behind this decision?
Hello, everyone. And really quickly, thank you, Kim and team, for the opportunity to share and participate today, as I believe all of us believe pay equity is such an important topic. So CSAIG started to conduct a manual in-house pay gap analysis About 7 to 8 years ago, we looked at basic methods, averages, distribution, and remediated our findings. About 4 years ago, we invested in utilizing a pay equity platform created by Syndio to conduct and refine the analysis so this process became a bit more rigorous. The reason behind why we started conducting a pay equity analysis is because of our company culture, really. For a long time, CSAA's leadership has supported diversity, inclusion, and felt strongly about being transparent in our policies, including pay, which fosters a culture of communication. We have been publishing pay ranges across the company before any legislation made it a requirement. We thought that if employees didn't hear and see the truth and facts, really they would come up with their own narratives. We knew people talked about their jobs and they compared. So we thought the right thing to do was to share and be transparent, especially since we knew we were attempting to do all the right things. We really do care about our employees for the obvious reasons, but also if we didn't do right by our employees, then how could we expect them to do the right by servicing our policyholders' needs? So conducting a pay equity analysis gives us a better view of what opportunities we have in our policies and practices. And if you think about it, pay is the outcome of various employee-related decisions within the company. Looking at our pay equity results either validates all our efforts or provides us a closer view of what opportunities we still have in order to really retain and attract the talent we need to be successful. And that is honestly why we also have a strong inclusion and belonging team to partner with and to help educate and steer the organization to complement all of our efforts.
Wow, that's amazing. I heard so many keywords in there that I was writing, but I have terrible handwriting, so I'm going to try to get this. You know, one of the things that really stood out to me is that you were already being very transparent with your employees, with pay and other things, because again, they're going to create their own narrative, right? So the culture is really fostering that sense of belonging and inclusion and being transparent and communicating with the employees. So, and I can't, you said 7 years ago manually, and then a few years after that, you are using a platform. So it can be done manually for those of you.
It can be.
That's a lot of employees, 3,900. So, well, thank you for sharing. Thank you. Speaking of a lot of employees, Dawn, UC Irvine is a large institution with over 36,000 undergraduate and graduate students and over 19,000 campus faculty and staff, which doesn't include student employees. Notably, UC Irvine was part of the inaugural class of companies to achieve fair play. I keep saying fair play. I have sports on the mind today, I guess. Fair pay workplace certification, a great achievement. First off, what percentage of that staff are included in your annual pay gap analysis, and how do you determine that? And second, what did it mean for UC Irvine to be one of the first organizations to achieve that certification?
Wonderful questions, Kimberlee. And I too would like to thank you for inviting us. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. You mentioned that we were experts. I honestly don't know that I'm an expert. I mean, we're sharing what we've done so far, but every day, Summer and I are still learning so much. And I've just learned so much even from Lena. So thank you so much for inviting us. I'm really honored to be here today to be a part of this. But yes, you're absolutely right. UCI is a very large employer. We're second largest in Orange County, only to the little mouse, Disney. They are the largest employer in Orange County. We are the second largest. And yes, we do have roughly 20,000 employees. Half of those probably are faculty. So we have faculty and staff. And then when we break our staff down, we break them into represented and non-represented. We have a very large population of represented employees, which means they're in bargaining unions. So our faculty their equity analysis each year is handled by a different unit, but there definitely is an equity analysis that's performed on faculty. For staff, it's roughly about 6,000 that we're conducting the fair pay analysis on, which is about 26% of our population. We are hoping to bring in our represented staff. However, obviously, because it's all, a subject of bargaining, we do have to bargain that with our unions. And so we're working on that right now. So in the meantime, we are working on the 6,000 non-represented staff, which is 26% of our population. But honestly, the honor that we received, being the first of 6 organizations in the country to be certified by Fair Pay Workplace, the only university and the only UC, is honestly the greatest achievement in my career. I've been in compensation about 36 years, started in 1988, and it was such a different time in compensation. It is amazing to see the progress. But honestly, not just because I'm sitting here doing a fair pay equity panel, it is honestly the greatest honor of my career, and it will probably stay that way until I, retire or whatever. It wasn't so much, of course, the honor, like Lena was saying, we do the right thing, we communicate, we are transparent, and it is kind of nice to know that what we're doing, that an organization like Fair Pay Workplace with their rules and standards, after evaluating what we do, our policies, our actual salaries, and our practices, that we are meeting, fair pay goals and objectives. That was an honor. But then when the news release went out, it was on Bloomberg. It got, sent around to all the executives. We had our own internal UCI Digest newspaper that it was released on. It was released to both our cabinets. So on the school side, we have a chancellor's cabinet. And on our health side, we have a medical center, a health system. On that side, we have a CEO. Both of those cabinet leaders sent out separate communications, just praising UCI, UCIHR, UCI in general, for the great work and for becoming certified. And then that kept getting reposted and retweeted. And
I'm on a webinar, but
oh, I think. So anyway, so it just kind of went on and on and on for weeks. It was just absolutely amazing. And now we've got our fair pay certification kind of button on our job posting website, our compensation total rewards website. We do new employee orientation training, and which we share with our new employees, what kind of place UCI is, and we include that we are a fair pay workplace organization. We do demystifying compensation training every year. We share it there as well. And there's nothing that gets the response like the fact that we are a fair pay workplace. Because when you think about it, everybody wants to be treated fairly. And so when you work somewhere, you want to make sure that you're, of course, being treated fairly. But how do you know that? You know that the organization is treating everybody else fairly, too. So it has absolutely, not that we were doing it to be paid back, but it has paid off in tenfold. And it really is, I think there are a lot of myths, which we're going to work through today. It really is, it can be very simple and very basic, and it really pays off.
That's amazing. So many, well, first of all, you said 26% of represented staff, which seems like, okay, yeah, you got some ways to go, but it's 6,000 people. So, and then.
Right, we're so large, but it's 26% of our total population.
Yeah.
Which is just the non-represented staff.
Which is just okay, yes, okay, sorry, non-represented, I got that mixed up. And also, I think that's pretty impressive, being the second largest employer in Orange County. I hadn't even thought about that before. So yeah, that's, and then one of the other things that you said is you post on your job postings, and it's very apparent that you're a fair pay workplace. And I completely agree with you. If somebody's looking for a job, that's a big attraction, right? Like, oh, these people, like they're being very intentional in their actions and their practices and their policies and their compensation. So I love it. And the training throughout, that's key too. So awesome. Thank you, Dawn.
Welcome.
All right, Summer. After earning your MBA at UC Irvine, you were recruited by the school as a fair pay specialist to implement the first fair pay program. And as Don said, you're taking the lead in the UC system in driving efforts to close the gender pay gap. I would love to hear you walk us through some of your crucial initial first steps in leading this program.
Thank you, Kim, for having us and for the team for all their help organizing this. To walk you through the very first initial steps, there's really two major steps in the very beginning of implementing a fair pay program that are crucial or important. I mean, that was the case for us. Number one is presenting to leadership and getting their buy-in. And let me talk about this a little more. You need leadership support because they're the ones that are going to help advocate for the program. Because the program is not just about increasing pay. We're not running a pay equity study or a fair pay analysis just to adjust pay. That's not the main reason. It's about changing practices that perpetuate pay biases. And so you need leadership to help advocate for that program and help spread that around the organization, managers, leaders, and so on. And the second thing when it comes to presenting to leadership and getting their buy-in is to get any financial support that could help fund the program. For us, budget is decentralized, so departments have to fund increases if there are any for their departments. But for example, when we first ran our first initial study, our provost helped fund the increases centrally. So that was really great support for the first time around to get everybody used to this program, that this is coming, and later on the departments would have to fund it. So that education was given to them after that first study. So whatever support you can get from leadership would help tremendously push the program forward. The second thing, the second major step that helped a lot initially is running a pilot program. We ran a pilot program for one division, and it was our Division of Finance Administration. We ran a whole study just on that group, just as if it was for the entire organization. And it helped because it gave us a good idea of what we need to look for, what the response is like from the division, what kind of questions did we get. All of that helped prepare us to run an overall program in the year after that.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I know I'll get to this a little bit more later about the time this takes, but these were just, you named just two initial first steps: buy-in from leadership. That's always really important. And then I love a good pilot program. So how, in terms of time, because I think sometimes people are eager to do, to just jump right in. Let's get this started. Let's do this, which is good. Intentions are always good. But how long did just that take you to educate leadership, get their buy-in, and then decide to do a pilot program? What did that look like?
Gosh, I think we started in 2019 and it was concluded in 2020. It takes several months. It really depends on the organization. But I think for us, the pilot program, it's a matter of months, less than 6 months for sure. Each organization is different. I think in higher ed, we tend to move a little slower overall. We take our time. We want to do things methodically. We want to do it right to begin with. But I don't know, Dawn, do you remember how long it took us to run the pilot program for DFA? I want to say several months, 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, I want to say just crunching the numbers probably took the first month, and then reaching out to the department HR representatives in that function, because you do need their input. I think Summer's going to take us through the process. And then when it comes back, you need to kind of regurgitate and kind of take a look at what you've got, calculate the remediations, the number, the costs, the impact to the budget, so on and so forth, and then the communication to the leadership to get approval, and then the communication to the employees. So I want to say it was like 4 to 6 months.
All right, thank you. Just want to, paint a realistic picture. I understand, like Summer, totally right. Like every organization is different, right? So, but 4 to 6 months. All right. All right. So, Lena, I have a question for you. We're talking about time, which is something you can never get back. So you have to be very intentional when you're planning things, right?
Right.
So my question is, what strategies does CSA utilize to conduct an annual pay gap analysis? And I would love to hear, kind of like what your time frame looks like as well. But specifically, what do you include in your pay gap analysis? Like what demographics and other variables like job roles and responsibilities, education, seniority level, experience, what types of things do you factor in? And then another question that I think often comes up as well is if you could provide insight into the adjusted and the non-adjusted pay gaps within the organization and kind of like what that entails.
Sure. So we follow a pretty comprehensive strategy by starting the process where we identify substantially similar work. We conduct a formal annual audit after our compensation planning cycle is complete. So that in terms of timing, it's pretty specific. And if there are any findings or observations from a gender and or race ethnicity perspective, we remediate and then take the time to dig into what may have caused the gaps. We don't remediate just to remediate, as Summer kind of alluded to earlier. We look and research to understand the why. I will say that it is healthy to have some randomness in pay. That is indicative that there is no systemic biases. But if we do observe something and we start asking ourselves questions like, was this a byproduct of hiring? Maybe it was from internal mobility movement. Is there a promotion schedule or a practice that we're not aware of that could cause pay disparities? One specific strategy and tactic we implemented in recent years to address pay disparities is establishing a pay floor. So we made a decision to not pay anyone below 0.9 of their job's market midpoint. That helps mitigate pay disparities by narrowing the pay range for our jobs, and it stops low and inconsistent hiring pay practices. One key point here is that we really do like our leaders to have discretion in pay as we follow a pay for performance philosophy. But they may not realize that some of their decisions could cause internal equity issues. So that's why we encourage our hiring leaders and our talent acquisition team to consult and discuss pay recommendations with my comp team as we have the full view of data for pay equity considerations. For obvious reasons, it's better to be more proactive than reactive on these matters. So we really try to address the root cause, identify any potential biases, and educate our leaders. So in turn, we hope that conducting a pay equity analysis gives our employees confidence that they don't think that they need to go elsewhere to be paid fairly. With all of that said, that doesn't mean people will be paid exactly the same, right? We do apply controls in our audit, like years of experience, time and role, career level, to explain some justifiable differences in pay. But if there are any pay disparities that are not justifiable, then we remediate any statistically significant gaps, and we make sure to monitor so it doesn't become a reoccurring theme.
Thank you, Lena. That's really helpful. One of the things that, there's a lot of things I took away from that, but one of them is it really is like a team effort. You
Oh,
have
yeah.
the hiring managers, the comp team, and then you said another team in there. There's one other
Talent
team.
acquisition, hiring managers,
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot of different involvement because we're all partaking in the whole employee experience, right? And these activities that impact pay happen throughout the whole life cycle of that employee, experience. So we have to factor all of that in because some pay disparities can start right from hiring. It could go into movement, and it can continue depending on how long those individuals are with our organization.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you had mentioned you established a pay floor where you don't pay employees below 0.9 market midpoint. Is that what you said?
Yes, I
See, I'm
did say
picking
that.
up
Yeah.
all sorts, I'm just picking up all sorts of knowledge. You're dropping knowledge on me today. So where do you, because I know this was actually, I think this was one of the questions that somebody had submitted in registration, like where would you find that information, like the market midpoint?
Well, we do pay for a lot of data. So, we participate in compensation surveys, and we get a lot of that information back. And what we do is we compile that and come up with our pay ranges. And we do have a range of 80 to 120. We have geocodes. We do a whole lot of analysis there, but the market midpoint is at 1.0 compa ratio of the market midpoint.
Okay, thank you. And
Of
I
course.
did see, I'm going to just grab this question out of the chat. How do you identify substantially similar jobs?
Yeah, so we look at the functions, honestly. We look at the role, the functions, and we start grouping. Some of it is a little, we kind of test and look. We try to be reasonable with how much we structure together. Sometimes it's a test and learn experience. But yes, it's not by department, because there could be analyst positions spread across the organization. Are they similar enough from a functionality perspective? And so that's kind of how we start the process of substantially similar jobs.
All right, thank you so much, Lena. All right. So Don, you said you alluded to your years of experience earlier. I think I'm very like I said, 20 years of experience. That's what I started. I'm like, wait a minute, she has more experience than 20 years. But and Summer had said that one of the first initial steps is to have the buy-in from the top, right? So I want to kind of circle back to that, and for your role in particular. So how important is it to have the buy-in and support from your fellow executives and the vice chancellor? And in what ways do you advocate for the total rewards program institution-wise? Why? Because it is a large institution and there are lots of, sometimes the top is just like 2 or 3 people, right? But for you, it's larger. So how does that look like for you?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I do have about 36 years in compensation, 20 of which are higher ed. So I think that's what you probably remember. 20 were in higher ed. And yes, exactly what Summer said about the key. The first thing you need to do is get executive leadership support, or at least a sponsor. So for us at UC Irvine, it's our vice chancellor and chief HR executive, Ramona Grella. She is a visionary. It was her a few years ago that started noticing we were getting comments, complaints, grievances about potential unfair pay bias, either due to race or gender. We did bring in a third party, a consultant, a few years ago to conduct an analysis. And it was at that point, again, Ramona, our chief HR executive, realized this is something that's not just one division or 1 year or one group of people. This is something that can permeate the entire organization, and I want to get a hold of it, and I want to address it, and I want to eradicate it as much as we can. And that's when she made the decision a few years ago. We will be the first, we will have a fair pay specialist. We hired Summer, and we will do fair pay analysis. Now the other UC locations chancellors are contacting our chancellor saying, tell us more about this fair pay study and these people that are doing it with you or for you. So we have been doing communications and presentations across the UC system. Just FYI, we have 10 campuses, 10 UC campuses, and we have 5 medical centers, which have turned into medical systems, which means each has multiple hospitals. So we are just growing in leaps and bounds. We're huge. So out of all of those UC locations, we are one of 10 campuses, and we do have a medical center. And so, yes, absolutely. You need the champion to realize that fair pay has to be a priority. Then you have to have resources put toward it. It really helps to have a fair pay specialist on board. And not just to handle one study a year, but to handle it throughout the year, because there's one-offs, and to do the policy and practice change work that has to be done as a result of your analysis. So it's absolutely critical because, and again, like Summer said so perfectly, it really does permeate everything throughout the organization. And it is the life cycle, like Lena's been referring to. So it can happen anywhere. And at UCI, we too historically had been bringing people in at the bottom of the range. We saw a couple of years ago with the Great Resignation that things were getting competitive. So we tend to hire people from the outside at higher salary levels. Sometimes that can appear to be bias, when actually maybe it's a budgeting issue. But historically, we have paid very low in the range. So we too are not only looking at fair pay, which is, do we have biases based on gender and race or any other factors like age? And equity. For us, equity means against the market. Or compression, maybe between a supervisor and the person that reports to them, or compression between multiple people in a department, all doing similar work at the same level, same years of experience, all the controls are the same. And it's not necessarily a fair pay issue. It's really just when did you come in? Were you paid too low? Those are kind of what we call equity. And we have both programs running every year. And it takes financing, it does take budget, but you can prioritize, which again, we will talk more about when it comes to fair pay remedies.
That sounds great. Thank you, Dawn. I love the idea it's just like a ripple effect, right? You were the first UC to do this, and one of 10 UCs, including the schools and healthcare systems. And I think about when we implement these practices across organizations, whether you're a university or a small business or a large corporation or a nonprofit, it's like, it's not just affecting the people that are the employees of the organization, it's affecting their families and their communities. And so I just love that idea of just like the ripple effect, and it, it's a really positive. So you all are leading the way. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And it even spreads to our medical center with our patients. Everything is about treating people fairly, respectfully, and just being completely transparent. Mm-hmm.
I love it. Thank you. All right. Summer. So talking about change takes time, and Dawn was talking about kind of this process is not just like it's not just a one thing and then you're one and done, right? It's a year. It takes a lot of time, and I'm curious, what is the time frame? And this is maybe not just one answer, but from start to finish with this process. And my questions are always two parts, so I apologize. And can you elaborate on the tools you utilize to conduct annual pay gap analysis? And I know this is one of the big questions out there for organizations that are just getting their feet wet in this process. Like, what are some tools and tips that you would recommend for those organizations?
Great question. So as far as the time frame, like I mentioned earlier, it really depends on the organization's size and who's working on it, how many people you have on your team that's working on a fair pay or pay equity study. But for us, it's about 6 months, like Dawn mentioned, and this is for the organization-wide fair pay study, not the pilot study. We start in the fall, we look at our data, we clean it up, then we run stats. Then we send it, to the departments to look at, because you have the quantitative data, which is just numbers, and then the qualitative data that we get back from the departments. They know the employees, they know how they're performing, and I'll talk about the phases of the study later. But so to do all that, it takes about 6 months, and then at the end of the process, we look at what is it that we need to adjust as far as practices and pay increases. And then as far as the tools go, the size of the organization here plays a big role in determining which tools to use to run a fair pay analysis. For us here at UCI, we're currently using Syndio, and just like Lena mentioned, they use it too. And we've been using it for the past 3 to 4 years. And the reason we chose Syndio is because we're such a large organization. We're about 5,000 to 6,000 employees, non-represented, non-unionized. And the intention to begin with was to include the unionized employees. So that would be about 10,000 employees. So when we signed up for Syndio, the intention was to include all 10,000. Then the decision was made later to hold off till we talk to those unions to see if we can put them into our data set. So with such a large number, you're constantly making changes to the data, to the way you run the analysis. The nice thing about Syndio as a platform is that you could make changes quickly. You could just upload your data set and then, change your controls. And I'll talk about that later. Now, in the past, I've worked for smaller organizations where I've used just pure Microsoft Excel. I did run stats through Microsoft Excel using their development tool. You can run regression analysis in there. Now, if the organization is very small, like we have UC Merced, our sister campus, they only have 10,000 employees, and they were considering using Symbio. So they talked to us about it, and we just, the advice was, you don't need Symbio. You're such a small organization. Your substantially similar groups are going to be anywhere between maybe 5 to 10 employees. You have to have large groups or a large sample size to run statistics or a regression analysis. So yeah, manual analysis by looking at employees and comparing them to one another should be enough if you have a smaller population. So here, I think size is going to be the big determining factor in which tool you pick. Either manual analysis, you have Microsoft Excel, which is free, or you could use a platform like Symbio. And now I think there's a lot more. Some organizations just use consultants because they feel like they don't have the bandwidth or the manpower to run such a rigorous analysis.
Thank you, Summer. Yeah, it sounds, I mean, that's the kind of the common thread, like it depends on the organization size, right? Because I know some, as many of you have probably seen our equal pay signatories, like the champions list, we have organizations as small as maybe 2 people to up to over 10,000. So it really will depend. I think that as far as like the tools and stuff too, we can put a link in the chat as well. But I know on our commission website we do have some other tools if folks are interested as well. So thank you for that, Summer. All right, Lena, I have a question for you. To close pay gaps, you must address inequitable opportunities for reaching top paid roles. When you and I spoke earlier, I feel like earlier, probably it's been a couple months now, you shared with me that CSAA reviews and monitors gender and race representation at management and executive management levels across the organization. And why do you find it valuable to review and monitor this? And how are you implementing changes to address any observed opportunities?
Yes. So another strategy we use to address pay gaps is monitoring and reviewing gender and race representation at the top levels of our organization. As we value and see the benefits of a diverse workforce across all career levels at our organization, we know that, if you don't have all genders and races represented at top, how can you expect to see that at the individual contributor levels? It is one tactic to attract diverse talent, but it's just as important to retain diverse talent. We don't want a leaky bucket. I have also heard directly from employees that they feel like they belong when they see leaders that look like them in management and executive roles, which motivates them in their career growth. Feeling seen and heard is really critical to our culture. So reviewing and monitoring race and gender representation is very important to us. We need diverse leaders to think about how we run our business and how to even appeal to our policyholders that are diverse as well. To go even deeper, we look at our hiring practice as part of that strategy. We look to see if we have a diverse representation in our applicant pool. And if we don't, we ask ourselves why. Is the job posting too narrow? Maybe it's too broad. Does it have too many specific requirements that might not necessarily be needed for that job? Statistically speaking, we know that many women try to see if they check all the boxes of a job posting before they even apply, which makes us really mindful of what we list as required versus desired qualifications. Lastly, we create and implement internal mobility programs to promote, career growth. For example, we have programs for aspiring leaders, and we're mindful of representation in that group as well. We do all of this really to motivate our employees to know that we want them all to fit and that they do all fit into all levels of our organization. So that visibility is really key to prove it and to show it and not just say it in a number of different platforms or opportunities.
I love that. Thank you so much. I think, as I think you all have said, it's not just about equal pay. It's about, you know, fairness and equity across the organization, and that, which is equal pay, is one part of that, right? And so, but then it permeates throughout all the other things that you're doing. And I love the idea you said, we don't want a leaky bucket, which is so true. And also, you also said, looking at your hiring practice, looking at job postings, the required versus desired qualifications. Because you're right, that has been an issue where women, like when they do look at job postings and duty statements, they think, I need to do everything on this thing, whereas
Right.
actually it's been proven that men actually, they just apply.
Yeah,
they do. I mean, it's research, right? So they just
Yeah,
apply.
they see 1 or 2 points and they feel comfortable enough to apply. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's really, that's a great practice to really examine those required versus desired qualifications. And I love the I was going to say invisibility, but the visibility across all career levels. And because if you're seeing people in these top management positions and executive, and it's like, oh, I could be that
Yeah,
one day. I could,
exactly.
and then you're actually doing the work where you're having the upward mobility programs and you're having the leadership trainings to actually accomplish that, help them accomplish their goals. So.
Right.
All right. I just said this, Don. Equal pay is just one part of the equation to a fair and equitable workplace. And I'm curious, as the Senior Director of Total Rewards, can you elaborate on UC Irvine's Total Rewards program and how compensation and equal pay factor into that program?
Absolutely. I also want to just tag on real quick, if I could, to what Lena just said about it's not just the salary once you have the people. This is something our provost and chancellor brought up when Summer and I went to the chancellor's cabinet and we presented on our fair pay findings. The first question our provost, who's a statistician, he's a professor of statistics from MIT. That's a little bit of pressure going into a meeting with him. Anyway, what he brought up was, okay, you and Summer, Dawn and Summer, you're bringing to us the issue once we have these people, and yes, we want to pay fairly, but how do we make sure we're bringing in a good representation? Well, of course, that brings in the employment arena. Also, while we have employees, it's not just pay, like Lena said. It is also who are we terminating? Who are we disciplining? Does it tend to be the same groups? So everything from employment to compensation to workforce planning and employee relations, labor relations, all of these things. It is throughout. So again, you have the leadership support at the top and you have the program set up to identify it anywhere and everywhere. But when it comes to our total rewards program here at UC Irvine, our strategy, our philosophy on total rewards is to take care of the whole person, their whole life cycle. Because we know, especially over the last several years, there's been a lot of research about how none of us is just one thing or two things. We bring our entire selves to work. We want to be our true selves at work. We have people and other things happening outside of our lives. So we're trying. And it's not just to kind of be the organization that can attract and retain, because we know how valuable that is and cost savings and so on and so forth. But really, when you are that kind of employer and you allow people to be their full selves and you try to kind of meet them where they are and provide what you can to them, they then tell their colleagues, their friends, their family. And then, now you have an organization full of people that kind of give you their discretionary effort. We call it engagement. So when people come to work and they feel like they belong and they're able to take care of themselves and the organization cares about them. They have more discretionary effort to put in toward the organization, and that's what raises performance. It makes it an enjoyable place for everybody, so engagement goes up. So that's really what our total rewards program aims at. It's really not just one or two things. I mean, total rewards is the 6 key pieces. It's compensation, which UCI really does focus on. We conduct our market analysis, we conduct our equity analysis, we align our pay ranges with the market. We try to pay fairly, and we do equity and fair pay analysis. And then on top of that, we have a very rich benefit program. Our benefit value rate is at about 48%. I think the market in private sector is about 40%, and higher ed's running about 41%. So UCI does have about 48% in benefits. On top of that, we put a very rigorous performance program. It is kind of state of the art. It's not about one review a year. It's about talking to people throughout the year through check-ins, very informal check-ins. We're training our leaders. That's another big one, training and development. Training our leaders how to be more effective leaders, more thoughtful, more sensitive, more transparent, better communicators. And if you don't want to do that sort of job, that's okay. You can be an individual contributor, but we're really doing a good job of identifying the right people and then training them to be good, true leaders. And then last but not least is our wellness program. And we'll be focusing a lot more on mental health, which we know is a big concern. So again, we're kind of looking at the whole person throughout their whole life cycle, and just ensuring, again, like I think we've all been saying, fairness, transparency, and open communication.
Thank you, Dawn. I like that, looking at the whole person throughout the whole life cycle, and that can look different for many people. As we know, some people are working a little bit longer now, right, because of COVID and everything, life basically.
Yes.
So thank you. All right, Summer, I'm gonna ask you a question about something that had asked Lena about a little bit about the information that you include in your analysis. So my question for you is, what information do you include in your analysis, and how do you communicate the results to executive management collectively and individually to your employees? And I know that you had talked about this before a little bit about communication, but I'm also interested in how do you implement the steps towards improvement? Because I know, again, that's not something that's just like done overnight.
So the information we include in our analysis is, number one, the substantially similar groups. And there was a question in the chat earlier on how do you come up with your substantially similar groups? Every organization is different. It really is up to you, but this is where you spend the most time initially, is coming up with your substantially similar groups, because once you decide what they are, you got to use them every time. You want to be consistent. Consistency is key when you run fair pay analyses. So for us, we decided the best way to look at substantially similar groups is to look at the job family in combination with the employee's job level. And we have 3 levels. We have senior management, we have managers and senior professionals, and then we have support staff. And so, for example, human resources employees that are managers and senior professionals are compared to one another. It might sound a little broad, but the law is not very clear. And like most laws, they're usually not very clear, and there's a lot of vagueness. So the law doesn't really say equal pay for, exact equal work. It says substantially similar work, right? So under similar working conditions. So this is what we feel comfortable with, and this is how we've been conducting it for the past almost 5 years now, before I started. So substantially similar groups go into that study or into the analysis. And of course, compensation. Which elements of your comp package do you want to include? For us, we've included base salaries only. Not all of our employees are on a bonus plan, and the bonus plan that our medical center employees get are based on other factors like financial factors and the company's performance. So we decided that it would make sense to just include base salary. So that's the compensation piece. And then the third piece that we include is what Lena mentioned earlier, the word controls. And what controls are basically compensable factors or legitimate factors. Lena mentioned the word justification, where you could justify pay differences. And here, consistency is also important. So you don't want to say that this year we want to look at experience, but next year we're not going to count experience as a compensable factor. You want to spend enough time deciding which factors are we really using to determine pay every day when recruiting or when reclassifying or transitioning employees from one job to the other. So compensable factors for us, we include, for example, years of experience, years of tenure, how long an employee has been here at UCI. We include the job grade or the pay grade, and there's reasons why we include that. A lot goes into why we put an employee in a certain pay level within the pay grade. And those are just some of the controls that we include. So I highly recommend spending enough time on substantially similar groups and which controls you want to include in the study. And of course, the most important piece and why we're conducting this is the demographics. So we include race and gender. Some organizations will include age. So any protected factor. We don't have issues when it comes to age. We've included age several times, and we don't see flags when it comes to that factor. So we mainly focus on race and gender. Those are the demographics that we include in our study. I completely agree, Dawn. She says, I love the phrase art and science. That's comp in a nutshell.
I just had to say that.
Yeah.
Lena said it to somebody previously. Can I just say, someone asked in the chat how to submit a complaint regarding a violation of the California Equal Pay Act. Who should be contacted?
Yes.
Was there's no fair pay specialist? At least at UCI, we aren't intake for complaints. That would go to our Office of Equal Employment Opportunity, or perhaps whistleblower, or perhaps through our workforce relations. So in other words, whatever place within an organization kind of is the intake for complaints, grievances, concerns, any of those sorts of things. That's within the organization where you would go, at least here at UCI.
Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, and we can put, Morgan, if you could put the, sorry, Morgan is the program analyst here at the commission. If you could put the link to the Labor Commissioner's office in the chat, that would be wonderful. And then, so you'll have a couple different avenues for that.
And to answer your second part of the question, Kim, in regards to communication, because this is a very important piece. As far as communicating to executive management, once we run the analysis, we look at the numbers, we determine how many increases we need to make. We put that all together in a presentation with a lot of visuals, because executive management doesn't have a lot of time. We literally get 15 minutes to give our presentation and we're out, and we're either approved or disapproved. So we put that all in, we give a presentation, and we're done. As far as employees go, we prep the managers, we give them an FAQ sheet, and we give them the letters that need to be communicated to the employees. Every employee that gets an adjustment gets a letter explaining why they're getting the increase and how much the increase is and what their new base salary will be. And the last thing I want to mention, we also, to get recertified, it's a requirement that you have to publish on your website a brief summary of the results. So we do that every year. A brief summary of the results gets posted on our Total Rewards webpage. And as far as implementing changes, it depends on what kind of changes we find, right? Is it a certain practice that needs to be communicated just to HR? We do the communication to HR. We've done a lot of, quick educational presentations on what our findings are to human resources and what we can do better. Sometimes it's just maybe overall management. It really depends on what the root causes are that we find.
Thank you, Summer. Yeah, I know I asked so many, I have a lot of multi-layer questions, but I like the the accountability piece, right? To maintain your certification, you have to provide a brief summary. And also I like how you prep the managers with the FAQs, and then how the employee receives the letter with their new information and the why behind it, because I think that's really important for them to get that. Thank you. Also, there's one other thing that you said that I think is important to note about equal pay, and looking at things is when you're recruiting, when you're reclassifying, and when an employee is transitioning from one job role to another. I think it's just, there's so many different layers to that, and I think that can sometimes get lost. So thank you for saying that as well. I'm looking at the time. That went by very quickly. I want to just check the chat. Okay, good. Thank you, Morgan. The Labor Commissioner's Office has FAQs for the Equal Pay Act, so please access that as well. And I do want to put everybody on this call has our website, but I'm going to put it on there anyways for those of you who would like to learn more about the commission or equal pay, or if you haven't signed the pledge, we really invite you to sign the pledge. We're really gearing up to honor people or recognize people on Equal Pay Day. The first Equal Pay Day of this year is March 12th, so less than a month away. One quick lightning round question for Dawn, Lena, and Summer. So just feel free to unmute yourself. I'm going to ask what I like to read, and I also like to listen to podcasts. So for those, and so I know that's two different ways of learning, right? So for those listeners out there today, what would be your favorite either book or podcast related to organizational performance or compensation? Or both, I guess, because they're kind of this.
For me, favorite book by far, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It is fabulous. I've read it a couple times. It's like a fiction. It's like a little story, and you can just see they develop characters, and it's just great messaging. You got to have trust amongst teams. And anyway, I love that. And then as far as podcasts, I love Comp and Coffee with PayScale. They did the January 2024 is all about predictions for 24. Number 1, pay transparency. Really, really cool. And then AI, of course, the second on that one. That's the January 2024 Comp and Coffee with PayScale. Then the other one I found was Thinking Inside the Box with Matt Burns. He has a bunch of really good ones. Servant leadership, storytelling, that sort of stuff. Anyway, those are mine.
Thank you.
I'll
I'll
back up Dawn. I'm familiar with the first two, so definitely I'll back those up.
Are you familiar with PayScale? Oh
yeah, we utilize. Yep.
Excellent. Yes. Oh yeah, I was really thrilled with that one. I liked it.
Very much so.
I'm going to go outside of the podcast and book arena and highly recommend joining compensation associations. We have one here locally in Orange County, OCABA, Orange County Compensation and Benefits Association. Lots of webinars, lots of resources that they offer. Highly recommend joining. I think a webinar or a educational briefing like today's helps a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you, Lena and Summer and Dawn, for being here and sharing your knowledge with us and your years. Everybody comes from different backgrounds and years of experience, and we really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone on the call, for joining. We're going to, like I said, we'll stop the recording here in a little bit, and the recording should be up within, I'm going to give myself grace and say by Monday. So thanks, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Take
Lena,
care.
it was such a pleasure. And thank you, Kimberlee.
Same here, Dawn.
Okay.
Thank you, Summer.
Talk soon.
Take care.
Nice meeting you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Nice meeting
Bye.
you.
Bye.